coronation. The whole army, with the exception of a few malcontents, being filled with joy and satisfaction that the question which had so long distracted their counsels and paralysed their efforts was now at length finally disposed of. These bright prospects were all, however, suddenly blighted and destroyed by an unexpected event, which struck everyone with consternation, and put all things back into a worse condition than before. As Conrad was passing along the streets of Tyre one day, two men rushed upon him, and with small daggers, which they plunged into his side, slew him. They were so sudden in their movement that all was over before anyone could come to Conrad's rescue, but the men who committed the deed were seized and put to torture. They belonged to a tribe of Arabs called the Assassins. This appellation was taken from the Arabic name of the dagger, which was the only armour that they wore. Of course, with such a weapon as this, they could do nothing effectual in a regular battle with their enemies, nor was this their plan. They never came out and met their enemies in battle. They lived among the mountains in a place by themselves under the command of a famous chieftain, whom they called the Ancient, and sometimes the Lord of the Mountains. The Christians called him the Old Man of the Mountains, and under this name he and his band of followers acquired great fame. They were, in fact, not much more than a regularly organised band of robbers and murderers. The men were extremely wily and adroit. They could adopt any disguise and penetrate without suspicion wherever they chose to go. They were trained, too, to obey, in the most unhesitating and implicit manner, any orders whatever that the chieftain gave them. Sometimes they were sent out to rob, sometimes to murder an individual enemy, who had in some way or other excited the anger of the chief. Thus, if any leader of an armed force attempted to attack them, or if any officer of government adopted any measures to bring them to justice, they would not openly resist, but would fly to their dens and fastnesses, and conceal themselves there, and then soon afterward the chieftain would send out his emissaries, dressed in a suitable disguise, and with their little assassins under their robes, to watch an opportunity and kill the offender. It is true that they were usually in such cases at once seized, and were often put to death with horrible tortures, but so great was their enthusiasm in the cause of their chief, and so high the exaltation of spirit to which the point of honour carried them, that they feared nothing, and were never known to shrink from the discharge of what they deemed their duty. The stabs which the two assassins gave to Conrad were so effectual that he fell dead upon the spot. The people that were near rushed to his assistance, and while some gathered round the bleeding body, and endeavoured to staunch the wounds, others seized the murderers and bore them off to the castle. They would have pulled them to pieces by the way, if they had not desired to reserve them for torture. The torture is, of course, in every respect, a wretched way of eliciting evidence. So far as it is efficacious at all in eliciting declarations, it tends to lead the sufferer, in thinking what he shall say, to consider not what is the truth, but what is the most likely to satisfy his tormentors, and make them release him. Accordingly, men under torture say anything which they suppose their questioners wish to hear. At one moment it is one thing, and the next it is another, and the men who conduct the examination can usually report from it any result they please. A story gained great credit in the army, and especially among the French portion of it, immediately after the examination of these men, that they said that they had been hired by Richard himself to kill Conrad, and this story produced everywhere the greatest excitement and indignation. On the other hand, the friends of Richard declared that the assassins had stated that they were sent by their chieftain, the Old Man of the Mountain, and that the cause was a quarrel that had long been standing between Conrad and him. It is true that there had been such a quarrel, and consequently that the old man would be, doubtless, very willing that Conrad should be killed. Indeed, it is probable that, if Richard was really the original instigator of the murder, he would have made the arrangement for it with the old man, and not directly with the subordinates. It was, in fact, a part of the regular and settled business of this tribe to commit murders for pay. The chieftain might have the more readily undertaken this case from having already a quarrel of his own with Conrad on hand. It was never fully ascertained what the true state of the case was. The Arab historians maintain that it was Richard's work. The English writers, on the contrary, throw the blame on the old man. The English writers maintain, moreover, that the deed was one which such a man as Richard was very little likely to perform. He was, it is true, they say, a very rude and violent man, daring, reckless, and often unjust, and even cruel, but he was not treacherous. What he did in the open day, and he was wholly incapable of such a deed as pretending deceitfully that he would accede to Conrad's claims with a view of throwing him off his guard and then putting him to death by means of hired murderers. This reasoning will seem satisfactory to us, or otherwise, according to the views we like to entertain, in respect to the genuineness of the sense of generosity and honour which is so much boasted of as a characteristic of the spirit of chivalry. Some persons place great reliance upon it, and think that so gallant and courageous a knight as Richard must have been incapable of any such deed as a secret assassination. Others place very little reliance upon it. They think that the generosity and nobleness of mind to which this class of men make such great pretension is chiefly a matter of outside show and parade, and that when it serves their purpose, they are generally ready to resort to any covert and dishonest means which will help them accomplish their ends, however truly dishonourable such means may be, provided they can conceal their agency in them. For my part, I am strongly inclined to the latter opinion, and to believe that there is nothing in the human heart that we can really rely upon in respect to human conduct and character, but sound and consistent moral principle. At any rate, it is unfortunate for Richard's cause that among those who were around him at the time, and who knew his character best, the prevailing opinion was against him. It was generally believed in the army that he was really the secret author of Conrad's death. The event produced a prodigious excitement through the camp. When the news reached Europe, it awakened a very general indignation there, especially among those who were inclined to be hostile to Richard. Philip, the King of France, professed to be alarmed for his own safety. "He has employed murderers to kill Conrad, my friend and ally," he said, "and the next thing will be that he will send some of the old man of the mountain's emissaries to thrust their daggers into me." So he organised an extra guard to watch at the gates of his palace, and to attend him whenever he went out, and gave them special instructions to watch against the approach of any suspicious strangers. The Emperor of Germany, too, and the Archduke of Austria, whom Richard had before made his enemies, were filled with rage and resentment against him, the effects of which he subsequently felt very severely. In the meantime, the excitement in the camp immediately on the death of Conrad became very strong, and it led to serious disturbances. The French troops rose in arms and attempted to seize Tyre. Isabella, Conrad's wife, in whose name Conrad had held the title to the crown of Jerusalem, fled to the citadel and fortified herself there with such troops as adhered to her. The camp was in confusion, and there was imminent danger that the two parties into which the army was divided would come to open war. At this juncture, a certain nephew of Richard's, Count Henry of Champagne, made his appearance. He persuaded the people of Tyre to put him in command of the town, and supported as he was by Richard's influence, and by the acquiescence of Isabella, he succeeded in restoring something like order. Immediately afterward, he proposed to Isabella that she should marry him. She accepted his proposal, and so he became King of Jerusalem in her name. The French party, and those who had taken the side of Conrad in the former quarrel, were greatly exasperated, but as the case now stood they were helpless. They had always maintained that Isabella was the true sovereign, and it was through her right to succession after Sibylla's death that they had claimed the crown for Conrad.